City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I'm Jack Reisenberg, Chairman of the Commission. At this time, I'd like to introduce the members of the Commission. To my far right, Commissioner Culbertson. To my near right, Commissioner Newman. To my far left, Commissioner Cushman, and Commissioner Karras, and Commissioner Shaw. This is Commissioner Culbertson's and Commissioner Shaw's first meeting and serving on the Plan Commission. First what?
Commissioner Karras.
Karras, what did I say?
Shaw.
Shaw. Great. Commissioner Karras, welcome. Welcome to the Plan. Welcome to the Plan Commission. From the city, Ms. Zerniak is here tonight. Our first item of business is approval of the minutes of the April 13th, 2011 Plan Commission meeting. Are there any corrections or requests for clarification? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item before the commission this evening is the recognition of past Commissioner Kathy Waldeck. Kathy was appointed to the Plan Commission in September 2008 to fill Ray Pushnicki's term. She was then appointed to her own term in May 2009. As most everyone knows, she's now moving to City Council to represent the First Ward. Kathy, we're going to miss you. We're going to miss your wisdom, and we're going to miss your succinct commentary. And on behalf of the entire commission, staff, and members of the community, I'd like to thank you for your service and wish you well in your new City Council position. And if you'd come forward, I'd like to present you with a token of appreciation to remind you of your years of service to the commission. Appreciation to Catherine Waldeck. Her service to the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission, member 9, December 2008, April 2009. Thanks again. Appreciate your service. Make us proud. Thanks for your time. The next item before the commission is consideration of a request for an amendment to Article 10, Personal Wireless Service Facilities of the City Code. The requested amendment would eliminate the permitted area for a future telecommunications tower on the Barra campus property and add a permitted tower location on the west side of Sheridan Road, south of Wesley Road, near the existing ComEd equipment. The Plan Commission will receive preliminary information and public comments on this item this evening. However, no action will be taken by the Commission on this item at this meeting. Do members of the Commission have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter? Hearing none, we'll proceed. A couple of things as we move forward with this this agenda item, and there's another agenda item, a similar agenda item for something in the Fourth Ward at the private bank on Waukegan Road near Telegraph. But a couple of things. First, in case everybody didn't hear, there is going to be no action taken on this petition this evening. It's for information only. Second, the reason that we're doing that is the consultant could not make the meeting tonight so, who has been employed looking at both of these agenda items. So there was a thought that perhaps we should cancel the meeting and then just wait until he could make it, and then have a full meeting in one night where we'd come to a conclusion and we would rule on the item. However, it was felt that that in this case, probably a two-meeting scenario was probably important. There seems to be some concern about both of these items. So inasmuch as we're not going to be taking any action, we thought it would be good to certainly hear the petitioner, and then to hear the public commentary, and allow the commissioners to speak to those items and question those items, and then probably more importantly, surface all of the issues and then provide all of the questions that hopefully at the next meeting we will be able to answer. So at this meeting, Kathy may have some of the answers to the questions. We may not have all of the answers to the questions. Once again, because the consultant's not there. So with that, I'd like to move forward. I'm also going to rearrange the agenda because of I think it would be more appropriate if we first heard from the petitioner. Then, Kathy, if you'd like to identify the issues from a staff perspective. Then, where we normally have the commissioners, rather the staff, with the commission, question and get clarifications from the petitioner and the staff, we're going to move that further down in on the agenda. And we'll go right into public commentary. So we'll have the petitioner, Kathy's surfacing of the issues as she sees them. We'll go right into public testimony. And Kathy, did you mention that there might be some cross-examination?
Yes.
That somebody is there petitioned for that?
Yes, there is one request for cross-examination.
Okay, so if they still wish to do that, we will move directly into that. Then we'll drop back to the commissioners for their questions regarding from the petitioner and the staff. So with that, the petitioner is Mr. Riley. You're there, okay. Would you like to proceed? Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen. My name is Richard Riley on behalf of SBA. You may know that SBA Towers is one of the largest tower companies in the country. We provide, service, siting services. Their main business is leasing tower space to carriers. I know that everybody in this room is acutely aware of how important wireless is, but even us in the industry have been surprised by the rapid growth. So I tried to put together a couple of slides. These are from Morgan Stanley, and they are put together to give us an idea of the industry. But I thought that their language was easier to understand, and the effect is the same. If you take a look at the bottom, we run around from 1960 through 2020. They talk about the number of units that are in service. And they begin, with mainframe computers, and we moved to mini computers. Then we moved to the PC around 1990. By 2000, we have 1 billion units between the desktop and the internet. And now we have close to 10 billion units with some mobile internet, which is wireless. And this concerns or involves things like smartphone, Kindle, tablet, MP3, cell phones, PDAs, car electronics, GPS, ABS, AV, mobile video, home entertainment, games, and wireless home appliances. There's a new category of wireless communications called M2M, which is machine to machine, not involving people. But the sheer volume of wireless transmissions causes a capacity problem. It's not so much coverage. In the early days, we used to talk to you about coverage. Some cases, like my particular petition tonight, involves both coverage and capacity. But this is a capacity issue that is not going to go away. This slide shows the relative growth between the different forms of internet traffic, wireless traffic. Voice, video, P2P, data, and, they give you a total, what do you call it, CAGR. And you have a growth here of video, I think, that was really unexpected. And you can see the tremendous volume that is going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years. It's not so much voice. Voice is the lowest, slowest growing one. Data and video is just, it's amazing. These are some quick figures. They were valid as of the end of last year. And, we now have 302-something million, subscribers to wireless, devices. We now have 26% of our households do not use a landline phone. They have given up their landline phone. The other things I've highlighted, the minutes of use, 22 trillion, rises dramatically every year. We have cell sites. There are 253,000 cell sites in the United States as we speak. And then the E911 calls, 296, per day, 1,000 per day. It's a tremendous service. I put together a little background timeline. SBA first approached the city in 2009. We had several meetings. We met with the receiver for Barrett College. We decided that was not going to go anywhere. They actually decided it was not going to go anywhere. We then began development on a site at Western and Wesley. We met with the city again in 2010. January, we had an initial meeting with the village board. And the consensus was, of course, that there is a need to improve the service in the village. There was a need to accommodate all the carriers had to be treated the same. They wanted to avoid any additional towers. And there was general recognition of an economic benefit to the city if the facility was located on their property versus on private property. We had a discussion of the relationship between structure height and the need for servicing multi-tenants. In March, we met with the Plan Commission. This was a very controversial meeting. We had a big turnout from the neighbors. They were opposed to this site. In fact, they were opposed to any new towers. The Plan Commission requested a review of all possible sites, and the hearing was continued, to April. Again, we met before the Plan Commission on April 14th. Catherine Cerniak issued a memorandum, and that memorandum, suggested several things which were in fact authorized by this commission. First one was to conduct further due diligence, on the feasibility and effectiveness of having the city-owned right-of-way as a viable site. And then to get an independent consultant, first of all, to determine, issues about the height of the tower, and then to talk about the type of tower, whether we can get away with a unipole, which is a pole that houses all the antennas inside without any external decks for frequencies. Then in November, we began work on the ComEd site. In December, we contacted Barrett College one last time. They gave us a final formal letter saying that they were not interested in proceeding. And then we went ahead and we started filing the petition and forming our application is before you tonight. I put together a slide showing the relative location of the sites that SBA has considered in conjunction with this amendment. Previously, back I think it was in 1994, if I'm not mistaken, the city sanctioned certain locations for the construction of towers. Barrett College was one of those sites, and they allowed the construction of a tower up to 110 feet. We then, as you can see, we first approached a Western Wesley site. It's contiguous except for the railroad tracks. And because of the resistance, we have then moved to the ComEd facility and location, which currently has a small Commonwealth Edison facility on it. U.S. Cellular is our primary client. This is their drive test data. I don't intend to spend a lot of time tonight, but it clearly shows, the red clearly shows, that there's a big need for service in yellow as well. This is a comparison of their existing coverage and what happens, pros coverage at 170 feet. If you look closely, we still are going to have issues along the beach and along the lakeshore. Your terrain here is such that there's a big drop-off, as everyone knows, and that place had it with the signal. But it does a tremendous amount, it provides a tremendous amount of coverage. These are site plans that we put together. You can see that this is the existing Commonwealth Edison facility here. We are going to use the existing access road. We'll have a separate easement here for utilities and wires, but it'll be underground. Our enclosure is 48 feet by 73 feet. It will house 6 equipment providers, 6 carriers will be able to go into this facility. That's a very important number, and we'll talk about as we go on. Here's a little bit blow up. You can see the cabinets, the space for equipment cabinets. It's surrounded by a 6-foot wooden fence. We have a construction easement that'll go away and be landscaped when we're done. We're actually to the north and to the west of the existing Commonwealth Edison facility. So the actual ground buildings and fence will be somewhat shielded by that facility. This is a picture of a unipole. It has 6 cavities inside. This is extraordinary. This is probably one of the largest ones I have ever seen. Some of the carriers are now using 2 of these cavities. The spacing on the antennas is 10 feet. That is what is recommended by RF engineers. So in order to fabricate a structure that will house what we anticipate to be 6 carriers, we are looking at 50 feet of antenna space. And that's what leads us to the height that we have requested of 175 feet. And one of the reasons we went to the unipole was so that it would improve the aesthetics of this type of a structure. We've had some photo sims prepared. We have 1 looking south, we have 2 looking north. This is a comparison. They have previously been submitted as well. You can see the pole here. This is existing. Here we are again. This is the second north view, a little bit closer now. And then this is the south view, no pole, and then this is the pole. Commonwealth Edison facility is here. It's shrouded by the bushes and trees. You can see that we are next to an existing utility corridor, next to the railroad, next to the bicycle path. We are shielded to the west by a very tall wall of trees. And we'll have photographs to show that. The only thing I want to focus on tonight is this issue of height. It is central to what SBA wants to accomplish and what they think should be accomplished on behalf of the city. There's 9 factors that are involved. I'm simply going to breeze through them. We had originally asked for 195 feet. I understand that that has no relevance to the request, but we went back and we did the RF engineering again, and our goal was to provide service without the need for an additional facility between this site and the lake. That may not be possible. We've done the unipole. We provided plots that clearly show there are 6 wireless carriers, not to mention ones we're not sure about, that will ultimately need to be accommodated at this facility. Currently, there are 2 carriers mounted at the roof level at Barrett College. We don't know what is going to happen with those facilities. We know that their height is not sufficient, and we know that these carriers will also need additional coverage. The big thing about the city's original plan was to sanction certain sites in the city and try and keep all the towers located there, like pre-approved sites, if you will. But nobody in 1994 was able to anticipate what was going to happen in the world of wireless. But as far as meeting the city's goal, this facility will meet the city's goal. By providing 1 space, 1 tower, instead of multiple towers at lower heights, so they'll serve the needs. I'm going backwards here. Number 8, point number 8. If you take a look at where the antennas are going to be within the structure, you can see that they're spaced 10 feet apart. And that is the problem. If you take a look at the last one, 119 feet, and you move that down, if you say, look, we should only have a 120-foot pole, the bottom areas are not going to be serviceable and are not going to be desirable to carriers because they won't have the necessary elevation, to get their signal out into the surrounding areas. Conclusions, I really think that the height of this structure, if we can build it to accommodate 6 carriers, really does meld with your original plan. The well-engineered facility, that's another point I'd like to make. Going forward, we know there's going to be additional demands. We know there's going to be additional capacity demands. We know that there's going to be other systems that are going to have to be deployed in Lake Forest, such as distributed antenna systems. Eventually, scientists tell us that we're going to be down to little transmitters in our houses that will work as a mesh network, across the board. But that is 20 years away. They are still deploying DAS systems now, and they're very, very unique areas. Population is heavy. We have existing above-ground utilities. You still have to run fiber optic to it. You still have antennas that are hung on poles. So that is, in fact, I'll show you one more slide. I added one slide afterward because there was a lot of hubbub a couple months ago. Headlines: new antenna is going to eliminate the need for towers. Which was a marketing man's, effort, which got a lot of attention from a lot of press, including tower companies. But this antenna that they're talking about, it's Alcatel-Lucent's Light Radio Cube, is in fact a tremendous advancement in antennas. And a combination of these little cubes can work, eventually to service the needs of a lot of the carriers. But you still have to elevate these antennas in order to get their coverage. You still have to bring fiber optic to them, you still have to power them, and there's a need for a heat sink with these antennas. So it does not obviate the need to build towers or to have a distribution system. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Kathy, identification of issues by staff.
Thank you, Chairman Reisenberg. Some of these comments will really apply to both of the petitions, so I won't repeat them a second time. First, I want to just kind of back up a little bit for those who may be new to this issue. As Mr. Riley said, the city does have an adopted personal wireless facilities ordinance. Was adopted shortly before I arrived, shortly before June of 1997. And that ordinance looked at the entire community and identified specific locations where rooftop antennas would be permitted and where towers would be permitted. At that time, city staff and the Plan Commission and City Council worked with interested, primarily institutions, who said, we're interested. We'd like the revenue. We'd like to see some of these facilities on our site. So the approved sites include Lake Forest College, where there are both rooftop antennas and tower, Lake Forest Hospital campus, where there's a number of towers, Lake Forest Academy. There were a few businesses out on Route 41, the lockup storage facility. That's a location on a private property where there are some towers. There are some rooftop locations here in the Central Business District, 580 Bank Lane. If you look out the conference room windows, I think it's 191 Deer Path. So there were various sites identified. That ordinance has served this community very well. We've made just a couple amendments to it over the past 15 years. Most of those having to do with allowing increased heights on some of the rooftops that were already identified as possible locations. About 12 months, 18 months ago, staff did go to the City Council and pose two questions. One, whether we should look at locating a tower on city-owned property at the compost center. Another site that's identified in the current ordinance is the compost center. If you look at the water towers, there's a number of carriers at the very top. Because that water tower is full, and actually the equipment that goes up the base of that water tower is completely filled that cylinder, we went to the council and said, here's a revenue opportunity. Should we be proactive and look at seeking out an opportunity for a tower at the compost center? The council said, we're not going to be proactive. Let's wait. We're comfortable with our current ordinance. It seems to be working well. We don't want to push it. Shortly after that, when Barra Campus was under the control of a court-appointed receiver, we were getting some calls. We knew that some companies were talking to the court-appointed receiver. We knew that the court-appointed receiver likely had a short-term interest in that site, and we were concerned about whether going ahead with a tower on Barra Campus, which is already a permitted site for a tower, was an appropriate way to move, given that ultimately we would expect to see Barra Campus redeveloped. And those tower locations were really pretty centrally located in that on that campus property. At that time, the council said, take the matter to the Plan Commission and begin a discussion. That's what we did about 12 months ago. We looked at different sites. The Plan Commission gave us a good framework to work from, saying, if you bring this matter back, we want to employ an independent consultant. We want to make sure a number of questions get answered. So that's where we are today. The reason we're bringing it back is because we did get 2 formal applications. It's now possible for the city to not respond to those applications. We are bringing this forward not because the city at this point has taken any position advocating or opposing the proposed code amendments, but because they have been submitted and we're required to go through a public process. That's where we are today. Both of the request amendments to our current code language. They request additions of tower sites to what's currently in our ordinance. In the case of this, the one that's before you now, it would essentially be an exchange of sites. Part of this code amendment would be an elimination of the approved tower site from Barra Campus. It wouldn't affect the rooftop antennas on Old Main, but it would eliminate the ability to build a freestanding tower at Barra Campus, and it would shift that approved site to Sheridan Road. Both would be code amendments, require public hearing, which you're opening tonight before the Plan Commission. When you're satisfied that you have sufficient information, it would require action by the Plan Commission, and your recommendation to support it, to modify it, or to deny it would then go to the City Council for action. So that's the process. So just to be clear, although the right-of-way in this particular request is city-owned, there has been no discussion with the city. There has been no negotiations with respect to a lease. There has been no review of the current Commonwealth Edison lease or location. The threshold question is whether the ordinance is even going to be amended. So this is not, at this point, a money issue before the City Council. If the code is amended, the next step would then be, with the approved tower site, if it's on city land, for the city to then entertain proposals from anyone who would want to locate a tower in conformance with whatever requirements you put on it on that particular site. Negotiations would begin. If and when those negotiations are successful and the council approves a lease, then a building permit would need to be submitted, where we would actually do the review of the structural stability, the electrical components of the tower. So we are at the very front end of that process. Many questions will likely be raised about those latter phases, and we won't get to the point of answering those until we see if in fact the code is even going to be amended. So I just wanted to explain that from a process standpoint. My expectation tonight is that I will take down the questions that get asked. I don't expect, as you said, Chairman Reisenberg, to have answers for you, but that we will take those questions. We will work with the independent consultant that has been hired by the city, and we will work with the city attorney, and we will work with our city engineer, whoever else we might need to bring in to answer those questions. I would expect to bring you answers and, if necessary, additional information back, probably in a question-answer format. I would expect our consultant or the Plan Commission will be requesting some additional information from the petitioners. One Once we prepare that information, our responses to the questions, we will make that available to the public as well as to the petitioners prior to the meeting, so that there can be some response, so that we can bring you hopefully a pretty concise package responding to the questions raised. And I do recognize that there may be some differing answers to some of the questions, and we will present those different points of view to you as well. So with that, I'm prepared to hear your questions and hear questions from the public and take copious notes.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask for public commentary, a couple things. If where we're heading here is BERA is off the table. There is no longer consideration of the site that was previously discussed in one of the meetings. I don't know what meeting, maybe it was several months ago, that was, I think, at Western and Wesley. What we are considering, or what is before us today, even though it's information only, is the ComEd site on south of Sheridan Road, south of Wesley, near where the ComEd equipment is. So I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. That we've kind of gotten there. We've already had 3 meetings on this. We kind of got there almost from the public commentary, I think, kind of drove us there. Certainly drove us away from BERA, and then BERA went away anyhow, and then it drove us certainly from the Western Avenue, Wesley, to where we are. So I wanted to state that. I also wanted to state something that's in that the commissioners have been placed in our packet, and it reads as follows. The city's authority over telecommunication facilities is preempted by the federal government. Specifically, municipalities are permitted from considering potential health or environmental impacts of telecommunication facilities. In addition, decisions cannot be based solely on aesthetic concerns. So, I know from prior public commentary, the issue of health came up. Cancer, recent stuff in the paper now with the cell phones, blah, 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 blah. You have to know that you may continue to say that, but there's absolutely nothing we can do with it. To us, we're told it's irrelevant. So we have to respect that, and we hope that you would respect that. So at this time, going into public commentary, I'd like to swear in anyone who thinks they might want to speak on the issue, either in support or in opposition. If you'd stand, please stand and raise your hand. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge? Good, thank you. So at this time, I'd like to invite comments from the public. If you could keep your comments to 5 minutes, everybody would certainly appreciate it. Oh, and when you come up, if you could just state your name and your address also.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the Plan Commission, Dr. Michael Williams, 428 Beverly Place. I'd like to address a series of letters that were sent to the Plan Commission and to the City Council in regard to the application, in regard to last year's event, and in regard to the application from SBA this year, where we raised some issues which we'd like the Commission to be aware of and to go on the public record. So the first issue is that the application provides absolutely no data to support the need for a new wireless facility. The statement is that the coverage in the southeast areas of Lake Forest is as poor as it can be. We have no factual data to support that. We have a map that's been provided which is entitled U.S. Cellular Existing Coverage in Lake Forest. As it was last year, there's no date on this, and it actually is inconsistent with the promotional material that U.S. Cellular is giving its customers to sell its services. Furthermore, the applicant indicates that the situation that US Cellular refers to is undoubtedly the case for wireless carriers trying to provide service in the area. This is totally speculative. There's no data to support it. And I think that once again we've had a petition which has no data to support it. And if there is no support from other wireless carriers, the issue of a tower to accommodate 6 wireless carriers is a moot point. Furthermore, the statement of intent indicates that the tower should be, tower amendment should go from 110 to 175 feet, and we've heard from Mr. Riley what the logic is behind that. And we think a wireless communications tower should be the last and worst case option to be considered by the city. Again, the applicant provides no data to support the need for a new tower, irrespective of the height. Indeed, the Centre for Municipal Solutions, which is an independent body advising townships, indicates that 50% of towers erected since 1996 do not need to exist, and the majority of towers that have been built are far taller than they need to be. And if you follow the news right now, numerous communities across the nation are rejecting applications from cell tower builders who cannot or will not prove need in terms of data, as opposed to speculation and hearsay. And again, I would point out that the application does not address the future needs. There's been no addressing any of the specific needs of Lake Forest. We've seen slides from Morgan Stanley. These are generic slides, and they really don't address what our unique needs are, and just argue the question that the more we build more towers, the more we're going to be able to accommodate needs. There's also a statement in the statement of intent that there will be negligible aesthetic impact. Our neighbours and ourselves think that 175-foot unipole in a residential area of Lake Forest will have a major and detrimental aesthetic impact on the environment, and that we really must look for alternatives before we have to go forward with a new tower, if indeed the applicant can show need for a new tower in the area. This would include co-location of units, upgrade of existing infrastructure, and alternative technologies, and we've heard a little bit about that. There are 2 new technologies that have emerged, and it seems that these are going to replace cell phone towers in the future. DAS systems, which one of my neighbours, Mr. Richard Stecker, is going to address in his presentation, and light radio. We addressed the DAS systems in the letter to the City Council and Plan Commission last April, and that information is on record. But I'd like to point out to you that the City of Lake Forest Residential Design Guidelines, part of the City Code, indicate that the character of Lake Forest is defined by the visual quality of its neighbourhoods. A single building out of context with its surroundings can have a remarkable disruptive effect on the visual character of a place, its effects, nearby buildings, the streetscape, and the image of the city as a whole. And I think this can certainly be applied to the building of a cell phone tower. And Mr. Chairman, with due respect, while the federal mandate says that we cannot make a decision on the basis of aesthetics, we can certainly find alternatives to meet the needs of the community which don't involve building a tower. One of these, I'd like to point this out to you, is the light radio, which Mr. Riley alluded to. In this particular slide, you can see the size of this unit here, and this came out of Bell Labs in New Jersey. It's inexpensive, space-saving, it reduces the amount of power required to run mobile networks. Obviously, it's aesthetically acceptable given the size of the units. It's built for addressing the future of broadband technology, and while it is an evolving technology, it's important that Alcatel and Lucent are going to roll this out in the Philippines in 2012, and they've already established contracts with China Mobile and Telefonica, which are the biggest carriers in China and Mexico, to use this technology. So in conclusion, in regard to the residents' concerns which were addressed to the letter that you received in April 2011, if a need is proven, which still remains to be established, All other solutions should be looked at before we build any new cell phone towers, and this should be the very last option considered by the city. One thing I would leave you with is that DAS systems were constructed in Medina, Washington in 2010 after an evaluation of the needs of that city. This is the hometown of Bill Gates, and I would argue that if it's good enough for the hometown of Bill Gates and Microsoft, it's good enough for Lake Forest. Thank you for your consideration.
You're welcome.
Sorry I only have 5 minutes, but I hope you'll find this interesting. My name is Richard Steck. I've lived in Lake Forest for 40 years. I live in the Villa Turicum subdivision, and I live about 4/10 of a mile from the ComEd site. It's a tower there is hardly in my backyard. I'll never see it, but I care a lot for Lake Forest, so I'd likely to hear what I'm going to say. What I have here is a system called Distributed Antenna Systems. And it's very easy to understand. A distributed antenna system consists of light poles, utility poles, light poles, with a little box on them, and an antenna at the top.
Mr. Steck?
If you could
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry.
stay near the microphone.
Oh, sure.
Or you
Or
could,
use the hand.
or you could
Or
pick
this
this
one.
one up and
Yeah, you
walk.
can use the handheld if you want.
Okay. No, I have my materials here. I'll do it from here.
Okay.
So all you have are light poles, utility poles, little box, and an antenna at the top. All of this is connected by fiber optics. The city here might have a fiber optics system already. I don't know. The material you see down here is connected by a fiber cable to that distributed antenna system. This can be 10 miles away. We can put this at the anywhere in the city. It just doesn't matter. It could be in another city. As long as it's connected by fiber optics, it'll work. One of the, oh boy, 2 minutes already. I'll go real fast.
We'll give you 7.
Okay, one of the advantages of this is that you mentioned that if you put in a cell tower and you have a problem at the beach, you have a problem at the beach. That's not going to change unless you put in another cell tower. With this system, you just run some fiber optics to the beach, if it isn't nearby there already, and you can connect up to 6 carriers from that point. Let me move on. Let's see. How do you? What do you have to do there? Okay, you can operate those, please. All right. Okay, I went to the web and I did a search, a Google search for cities with, I'm going to call this DAS instead of distributed antenna systems because it's just faster. So I just went for a search. If you look through this table of cities, this is only a partial list. It has cities that are much bigger than ours, like Philadelphia, Los Angeles, San Diego, Boston, and it has cities that are smaller. The size of the city doesn't matter. There are many cities here that are like Lake Forest and a lot that are not. But look at the bottom, Barrington Hills. Bucolic, Barrington Hills. Mike? Barrington Hills is 23 miles away from here. It went all DAS in 2008. Barrington Hills is an area of 5-acre zoning, riding trails, fox hunts. They didn't want any cell towers. Barrington Hills is 26 square miles. Lake Forest is about 16. 24 nodes means a box or a utility pole. 24 nodes cover 26 square miles. It started out with AT&T. There's 6 cell phone carriers there now on that system. That installation was by American Tower Corp, who's in that business. I have a lot of respect for SBA, but SBA is also a major investor in a company called Extenet. Extenet is a DAS company. They know where it's going. So why should we have 25-year-old technology instead of moving ahead where it's far more flexible? Next. You don't have to go to Barrington Hills to look for DAS. DAS is right here in Lake Forest. There was an initial Nextel contract in 2005 where push-to-talk cell phones were started in the city. That worked so well, it was renewed in April of 2011. It's located on utility poles, and it's used by all the Lake Forest City departments. It works very well. Okay, next one. Here's an example of the first DAS box I spotted. It's close to my home. It's 1,000 feet south of the ComEd site. If you can see, all it consists of, all that you will see is the box and little antennas at the top. You wouldn't even know it's there. You would never know it's there unless I told you about it. Next. Here's another one on Sheridan and Greenview. Maybe some of these are in your backyard. This is a newer one. It's the same thing. Utility pole, little box, antennas at the top. Put these anywhere. Next. Here's one at Wesleyan Ridge. Next. And here's one on Waukegan Road south of Gavin Court. Gavin Court is near Sunset, if you don't know where that is. And here's a little box, and here's antennas at the top. Next slide. If you turn your car around and go 5 miles south on Waukegan Road, you come to the Deerfield Village Hall. And here is a cellular monopole antenna of the type we're talking about. This one, please ignore this mess of antennas here, which were put there by the city of Deerfield for its services. All you're talking about is this smokestack-like structure, which is about 3 or 4 feet at the base, like this. This one's 115 feet high. The system proposed is 175 feet high. If there are any, I won't even go into the hazards of having an antenna that high, a structure that high, near ComEd, near trains, etc. You know that already. If there's any sailor among you or in this room, you would know that sailors use a formula called the line of sight formula. When they're out at sea, away from a city, they can tell how far they are away by looking at the height of certain buildings. This structure, a structure of 175 feet, can be seen theoretically, if there's no obstructions, it can be seen for 15 miles. We'd have a new landmark in the city here. I strongly urge you to consider, to research, consider, talk to the consultant about using a DAS system, because a DAS system supports all of our future needs, not towers. Towers are very old technology. I'd like Lake Forest, my time's already 8 minutes. I'd like Lake Forest to be in the forefront of emerging technology. And I'd like to preserve the character of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes? Mm-hmm. No.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
My name is Holly Williams, and I live at 428 Beverly. And I'm glad the subject of DIS has come up like this, and even that Mr. Riley brought up a slide at the end of his presentation about DIS and new technologies, because frankly, there's something that really puzzles me here. And we included information about this in the citizens letter that you must have in your packet that was written in 2011, which comprised our letter from 2010, and many of you weren't involved in the process then. But I'm going to read a little bit here, and it ultimately ends up with a couple questions that I guess only Mr. Riley can answer for us. Okay, in an article in the March 10th, 2011 edition of the Wall Street Journal, they had a piece called Top 10 Venture-Funded Companies. And number 5 is Extenet Systems. And they go on to provide basic information, including the major investors. And lo and behold, SBA Communications is one of the major investors in Extenet, a DAS provider. There is a website that SBA has, and I don't know if the overhead projector has a separate, I'm a Luddite, so take my word for it, or I'll give you copies of this. I will just read what the website says. As a complement to our tower and rooftop solutions, SBA has collaborated with Extenet Systems to provide cost-effective, multi-carrier distributed antenna systems, DAS, solutions for improved coverage and capacity in hard-to-zone and environmentally sensitive areas. And it goes on to direct the public on this website to the Extenet website. Extenet then says, if you go to their website, and of course amongst many things, Extenet Systems has established a sound regulatory process that meets community standards and conforms to all required laws and ordinance. We present no environmental impact and achieve compliance with the appropriate regulatory authorities in close cooperation with our wireless service provider customers. In, I guess it was 2010, Jeffrey Stoops, who was the CEO of SBA, made this comment when they did their initial investment in Extenet, a DAS company. SBA will work closely with Extenet to provide comprehensive customer solutions, and our goal is to provide increased investment to Extenet over time as required. So my questions that I guess Mr. Riley can address are, given SBA's documented investment in state-of-the-art technology for its own corporate future and growth, why are Mr. Riley and SBA petitioning to impose a soon-to-be outmoded unipole on Lake Forest? We're looking to the future here. They are. And secondly, why, Mr. Riley, are you trying to sell us on a tower, a unipole, a monopole, you can call it whatever you like, something to which we have so many legitimate community objections, when SBA, as a DAS provider through Extenet, could be proposing a more amenable, less invasive, and more technologically advanced DAS system if, and this is where all the contingencies come in and everything we're arguing, and we know that it's going to be in the report from the consultant, if there is a proven need for enhanced capabilities in the first place. And I just don't understand why we're getting the big unipole. You know, that's the only way to go. And SBA is already bought into the DAS technology. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there, yes, sir? Mm-hmm.
I'll make mine fast.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry, I'm Alan Palmer. I live on 1077 Coventry by one of those, now I know what that is, that recently installed. I saw the last time, it was a couple of years ago, I can't remember, maybe longer, when Lake Forest cut a deal with a carrier. And I said to my wife, I'm like, you know, I just don't understand here. We have this whole frontier here. I don't know why the government, I mean, how much is a tower like that? Okay, it's a little bit more than I thought it was, probably. But I just wanted to have a couple. First, you can shelve it for things of technology before we rush into this. And the length of contract, is this a fixed rate? It seems like everybody is buying fixed rates before the city might commit to something. I don't know how long these leases are. Are they more than 10 years?
I don't, if you can pose that question, and then
Okay,
staff will try to answer it. I don't know that anybody has that answer.
Okay, okay, I'll make it. I was wondering the range of these, if it's in, I said cities or miles, but the crowd here was, the residents are such an asset in a case like this here, where I would put it open to, suggest possibly putting it open to a public comment. You can get kids, anybody can Google anything nowadays, and instead of, before you do the consultant thing even, if you can go to some kids that are going to be engineers and research this, and then come back and get a public comment on the particular things, although two of our residents have already suggested much, pardon me. And that's it.
Thank you. Yes, sure.
My name is Sandy Gannon. I live at 650 Northmore, and I have just a couple of quick comments. One, the Midwest Wireless Consultant Services, who is the consultant hired and has requested information from SBA's list of, it's in your packet, 12 questions. I would hope that the responses come back at least 2 weeks before the next meeting, so the public will have a chance to see what the responses are, review them, and maybe have some pertinent questions that would be germane to this whole discussion. Not just discover the answers in the packet as you walk into the next Plan Commission meeting. I think that'd be helpful to everybody. And it occurred to me that the school districts have cell towers. Leasing arrangements get funds from it. Is there any coordination between the city, the technologies that may be used, and what the school districts are doing? I mean, I would hope that they'd be working hand in glove, but that may not be the case. I don't think it is to date. That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further public comment?
I'm Patricia Reese, and I live at 625 Beverly. I've lived there for over 35 years. The designated proposed site of the cell phone tower is just west of the railroad tracks. It's maybe a public right-of-way, but it's also a very lovely piece of property. It's prairie land that is not only being taken care of by the city, but it is also being taken care of by open lands. They do a burn every year to keep it in top shape, and the city, in its wisdom, has just planted 50 to 100 trees there, and they have water bags on them, so I know they want to keep those trees going. Now, to put a tower in a beautiful piece of property, it's the most east entrance, southeast entrance to the city, and it's a beautiful entranceway. The AT&T boxes have been there forever. The camouflage that you talk about, the bushes that camouflage it, I don't know what they're planted there for, because they don't grow and they don't camouflage. And what does an 8-foot fence do to a 100-and-something tower? It's visually repulsive. Just on the other side of this piece of property is a patch of woods that you talked about. It is over a mile long, and the city and the residents work together to preserve the Beverly Woods, which is all oaks. They work very hard to keep that from being developed commercially or residentially. So now we have a proposal to build a cell phone tower right in the beautiful property that is being maintained and enhanced by the city and open lands. And you have the woodlands that is over a mile long right adjacent to it. Not to say it's in the middle of a neighborhood with school children. Now, there are many other places for cell phone towers, and there's the new technology. But we shouldn't even have to be talking about a cell phone tower here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay. I have a petition that Kathy gave me from Mr. and Mrs. Williams for cross-examination. Do you still wish to do that?
I'd like to ask one question.
Sure.
Cross-examination, Mr. Riley?
Pardon me?
I can cross-examine Mr. Riley?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Riley, the preliminary comments from the consultant raised 12 issues that you need to respond to. Why do you not provide information rather than speculation when you come forward with these things? You show us projections from Morgan Stanley which have got nothing to do with the immediate question in hand at Lake Forest. I think I would wonder the question, why is your overture to the city so frivolous?
We knew that there was going to be a consultant appointed in this case, and we were waiting to get direction from him as the type of information he requested.
Mr. Riley, can you pick up the microphone, please?
Sure.
Right in front of you. Thanks.
So now that we've only received this information as of last Friday, and we will respond. There's a couple comments I would like to make, maybe not in direct response to this question, but I think it's not a simple matter. There was testimony early tonight that in Barrington Hills, it was American Tower who was building out the DAS system. Well, they are one of the largest tower companies in the country. They may actually be number one. Every one of the tower companies is heavily invested in DAS systems because they are in the business of facilitating carriers and providing distribution systems for them. And every one of these communities, including Barrington Hills, have towers. You know, it's not that they have DAS exclusively. They have an overlay of towers, and now they're using DAS in certain areas. And as time goes on, we will move down that list. That last slide that I showed you listed all the types of cells that we have and their relative sizes. I would commend that to you, and you would understand that this is in most sophisticated wireless systems today, you have a variety of different cells that are being used. When I began work in Chicago, we turned on Chicago some years ago with only something like 35 cells, and when I left, we had close to 1,200 for one carrier. You can't walk down the street in Chicago without being within 100 yards of a cell site. Not that you would ever see it. They're microcells, FEM2 cells, little cells. DAS is just one of the ways that we can provide a wireless signal. And it is appropriate in a lot of cases. And it is ultimately and probably will be utilized in Lake Forest, but not exclusively. And it's a very expensive solution, which always gets weighed into the factors as well. You have disruption, you have to lay fiber optic, you got to bring power. You do have the visual intrusion of the antennas and the boxes on the poles. I note that they have raised them higher in this case, which is a good solution to keep them away from the visual, aspect close to the ground. Every one of the companies is involved in DAS. It's not that we're trying to avoid DAS. We just don't think it's an appropriate solution in this case for this location. And I have no doubt that we will have to prove that, to your consultant. So we will endeavor to do that. We just received the consultant's comments last Friday. So, we really have not had an opportunity to respond. And in fact, some of the information requested is probably not relevant to our particular petition. So I was going to request, to meet with Kathy and a consultant to find out exactly what he would like. And now that the issue of DAS has been raised to the extent that it has, I feel there's probably going to be follow-up questions regarding that system specifically.
Thank you. Mrs. Williams?
I do have one other question for you, Mr. Riley, and this actually was a passage in our 2010 letter, and it was written by Georgia Kiriakou, who is a neighbor who is not able to be here this evening. She is an attorney. And I'm just going to read this verbatim because this is a question from Mr. Riley. The present application for the ordinance amendment to allow a 175-foot monopole is respectfully submitted by SBA Towers, IL LLC, Richard Connor Riley. That is what it reads on the proposal. And then from our letter. In an email dated 8/24/09, Mr. Riley stated that SBA needs a 190-foot tower, and this was history, to meet its current and future wireless needs of the community. This memo highlights two problems. It confuses carriers with tower companies and needs with desires. Under the 1996 Telecommunications Act, 47 U.S.C. 3332, Section C, only a carrier has standing to assert its provable need to provide functionally reliable service primarily within an unserved area and not an adjacent community. Under federal law, and we are all very mindful of federal law because we can't talk about health and we can't talk about a million other things, but under this federal law, a tower company such as SBA is no different than the owner of any other structure to which antenna could be attached, including, for example, a building, utility pole, an electric transmission tower, billboard, or church steeple. Tower builders and advisors, like Mr. Riley and SBA, have no standing under the statute or before a community, and thus do not trigger the issues regarding the federal preemption of the city's authority. And here we are, paying due respects to this proposal, and I wonder if we even have legal grounds that we have to listen to it. Mr. Riley, you're an attorney, also. What's the answer?
Yeah, Mr. Riley, would you like to respond? Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
Interestingly enough, there is a case on point now, federal case on point, saying the tower companies do stand in the shoes of carriers, and all the protections have in fact been extended to them. I don't have that citation with me, but it is available. I will endeavor to provide it for you. But if that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Kathy, in terms of moving forward with the agenda, do you want to respond to public testimony? And then we'll open it up to the commissioners?
Sure, just a couple of responses. There were some questions about the terms of the lease, and just to be clear, right now, this is just a request for consideration of amending the code. If the code is amended and this site becomes a permitted tower site in the code, then the city would begin negotiations on a lease. No discussions regarding a lease with respect to time or dollars, or no discussions at all have taken place at this point. And they won't until there's a decision made on whether or not this site should in fact be considered for a tower. Just because this is in the code, it wouldn't guarantee that there would be a tower on the site. It just puts it on the map and says this is a permitted location. Not unlike commercial zoning allows a retail store to be at a particular site, doesn't require that it be constructed. I did want to clarify that the initial charge that we gave the consultant was to look at some basic questions. Did the information submitted demonstrate that in fact there was a need? If in fact it did demonstrate that there was a need, what various technologies could be used to meet those needs, and what would be the characteristics of those particular technologies? Given that when he looked at the information, there wasn't enough to answer those questions, we didn't even get that far. He simply made a request for additional information, and we will certainly, as I said, work with the consultant, work with the city attorney as necessary, or others, prepare answers to those questions, and we will make that available to the public prior to your meeting. And then finally, the question, are we coordinating with the schools? Yes, we are actually in very close coordination with the schools, communication with the schools. Lake Forest High School, District 115, does have a number of rooftop antennas at the East Side Campus building. The West Campus is very close to the city's water tower, where I noted earlier there are other providers. So we are looking at opportunities, if a demonstrated need is proven, looking at opportunities for what technology would be best and what sites would be best for the community. So yes, we are in close communication.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Now from for the commissioners, questions of the petitioner or staff? Start with Commissioner Newman.
I have an initial question about what we're exactly doing tonight. I'm a little unclear. This was not an action night, but you just mentioned that it was, in fact, a discussion around changing the site of a possible permitted tower. Is that really what we're talking about tonight?
Tonight is, as Chairman Reisenberg said, really the opening of the public hearing on these two petitions that have been submitted. The petitions request amendments to the code. The requested amendments in each case request that an additional site be identified as a permitted location for a tower. So this is, you've opened the public hearing, you've heard from the petitioner, you've begun to take public testimony. What I would expect is that we will go back, answer all the questions that have been raised. I would expect that you would, at the end of your discussion tonight, hold the public hearing open, continue this matter, and direct that we conduct further due diligence and bring it back
one of
to
the
you when
issues
we
I
have the
have
answers.
is on this verification of levels of coverage in the area in question. There seems to be a dispute about what is in fact the level of need in Southeast Lake Forest. Would the independent consultant be capable of providing those levels of coverage? Good, bad, indifferent?
Yes, and he will put the burden on the petitioners to provide sufficient data that he can then analyze and review and verify.
Okay.
So
good.
yes, he will respond to that question.
What is the height of any pole above which you require a blinking light? If it's FAA or FCC, or do we know? I looked in the code on today, but I didn't see any reference to 200?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me. It's 200 feet, but if the FAA field, at 200 feet is mandatory. Less than 200 feet, it's up to the FAA. Depends on what the tower is.
And we will add this to our list of questions to
Okay, good.
get responses.
I'd like some clarification on this standing issue, whether the tower stands in the shoes of the carrier or not. It was just brought up at the end here. I think we should probably pursue that either with our legal staff or whatever. I'd like to know more about the distributed antenna system, what's involved in that, what it's required, whether the petitioner can provide that for us, if that's really a viable alternative. And then I'd like to know about capacity issues. If a tower were to go up, at what point, I mean, a tower only has so much capacity, as I understand it. Given the level of usage in Lake Forest, if a tower went up, would it be at capacity almost immediately, or is there some room for growth there? And then I think we should probably find out about existing fiber optic in the city. I know there's one running through my front yard, but it's not for it's not for residential use. They put it in a few years ago.
Can we tap into that?
Yeah, can we tap into that?
Always wanted to, but so I think there's fiber optic cables running around town that were put in for city use or something. I don't know what it was for, but I remember it going in several years ago. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Culbertson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions pertaining to background. I'm trying to come up to speed. Kathy, how many tower sites are there permitted in the city of Lake Forest right now?
I could look at the ordinance. I don't have that number off the top
We
of my
can find
head,
out, though.
but those, the ones that I mentioned.
Lake
in,
Forest College, Lake Forest Hospital, LFA, 41 lockup.
The water
The
tower
water
site.
tower, I would count as a tower.
And we do have a map of those, and we can
And
certainly
then there's
provide that to you.
Those all have antenna on them right now, right? The ones I just listed.
Correct.
Is that correct?
The
The compost
only-
center is a potential site, and Bear is a potential site under
Oh.
existing ordinance.
The compost site, the water tower is located at the compost site, and what's permitted there is co-location on the water tower, and the water tower is full. Bear, I believe, is the only permitted site where there is not a tower located. There are rooftop antennas on Old Main, but there isn't a tower.
Right. So there are basically 5 towers and 1 potential approved site right now.
There's a tower.
We'll confirm that for you.
Right. Okay. I just like,
I'd like to hitchhike on that just a,
yeah.
how many towers are there?
How many towers?
Towers, right. I mean, I don't consider a rooftop antenna
Right.
to be a tower. How many towers?
At the hospital, I believe there's more than 1 tower. I think
Okay.
at the lockup site, there's more than 1 tower. I know there's one there's one on the college campus. There is one at the academy. Again, we have a map, and I will
Okay,
make sure
okay.
that's in your next
So we do have
packet.
towers.
With the
Fine,
detail,
okay, fine,
yes.
okay.
And that'll be provided. Okay. When the overlay was developed, or since it was developed, has there been any analysis or study as to how many towers located strategically would provide comprehensive coverage for the city of Lake Forest?
We will certainly look at that with the consultant, but it's one of those questions, comprehensive is hard to define. What we've seen is the companies have changed, and changed quite often. There are consolidations, and even with consolidations, we don't see antennas go away. For a number of years, the sites that we have had have served the community very well. There are some gaps in service, and we've heard different reasons for that. Some of the reasons being that some carriers have chosen not to build out their systems in certain parts of the community, because when you get near the lake, part of the area isn't serving anybody. But we will look at whether there is an overall need in the community. We will look at the areas where there are gaps. If there are gaps, confirm those, and then look at what technologies would best be available to serve those gaps and be compatible with the community.
My query pertains to towers specifically, in that I think the spirit of the ordinance is such that there's an intent to minimize the number of towers. And to that extent, if we had some analysis that studied the issue of how many towers strategically located could provide comprehensive coverage, I think that would be beneficial. If the towers and/or the technology becomes obsolete or is abandoned, are there any provisions in the ordinance or in the leases or anywhere requiring the owners to deconstruct the towers and restore the property?
Yes, there are those provisions.
And where are they? Are they in the ordinance or in the lease? Or?
We don't control all of the leases. Some of the leases are with other institutions or private, but there's language speaking to that in the ordinance, and in most of the leases, there is also that requirement.
So hypothetically, if a tower was built and was subsequently years later superseded by a better technology, there would be some mechanism whereby the owners of the towers were required to bring them down.
Yes, and with any code amendment or with any lease that the city were to enter into in the future, we could look to enhance that language if appropriate. We can certainly work with the city attorney on that.
Thanks. I just want to turn back to what the consultant is working on. Clearly, the folks who've addressed us this evening are very concerned about whether there's any factual data to support the contention that there's a gap in coverage. So is the consultant is specifically charged with that task, correct?
Correct.
Will he be using his own data collected, or will he be relying on data provided by the petitioner?
He will be doing both. He will evaluate the thoroughness, accurateness of any data provided and do his own analysis.
Okay. And of course, he will be providing an analysis of alternative technologies,
Yes,
their limitations and their potentials.
yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Shaw?
My questions were answered by the questions that preceded.
Good. Commissioner Pierce?
Yeah, to build on what Commissioner Newman had asked for with regard to the DAS system, I'd like to know if more than one, if we're confirmed that more than one carrier can get on the DAS system, as well as get a relative comparison of the cost versus the tower versus the DAS system. And additionally, for Mr. Riley, I'd like to, I think in the materials we were provided, they talked about 170-foot coverage of the tower. Is that the limit of the tower, or is there more? And I'd like to see, if possible, if there is more coverage, does it go into other municipalities and that sort of thing? And if so, could you provide that information? Additionally, I noticed that in the views of the tower, if you could also provide photos of the southward view from the road and not just from the bike path as well. In the materials, it only included a southward view from the bike path. And I believe one of the, I may have misread it, but at one point in the materials I read that there is a tower on the Barrett property, or is that not in existence?
There is not a tower.
Okay.
A tower is permitted. There are rooftop antennas on Old Main, but no tower.
Okay, and then again, to clarify or build on one of the questions Commissioner Newman had asked, one of the things we're looking at as well is not only moving or relocating the site, but we're also looking at allowing an increase in height as well, from the 110 feet to the 170 feet, correct?
That is what is requested, yes.
Right, okay. That's all that I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Cushman?
There was reference made to the fact that Barrington Hills operates the DAS system in combination with existing cell towers in that region. Given the fact that we have 4 or 5 existing either tower or elevated facilities already in the city, what research have you done about internally at SBA about the ability to employ the DAS in combination with the existing facilities to do to coordinate that kind of implementation versus the one that's being proposed right now? That's to Mr. Riley, excuse me.
I'm not sure what analysis has been done on the side relative to both. In this instance, there is no tower structure in this whole quadrant of the city. When the city was originally looked at, in 1994, the cells were generally larger cells. That is, they transmitted a farther distance. And I could take a look at the grid and we could figure out how many miles it was. But as the system grows, you have cells that are 2 miles apart. Then it happens that you build a cell that's roughly in the middle between these 2 cells. And when that capacity is reached, then you build another cell in between those 2 cells. And you can see that the distances between the cells becomes much less, and the need for height comes down as well. But in this instance, there was never a tower built in this quadrant of the city. And there's a need, that reference to 170 feet, and that the transmission rate is, it's the signal propagation when the antennas are at that height. And part of what the consultants asked us to provide now is different propagation maps based upon a different height, and we will provide those. And what we anticipate they're going to show, of course, is there will be a reduction in the footprint of coverage. So, to answer your question, I don't think that this was ever a consideration for DAS because it was probably deemed inappropriate, for the coverage area that they're trying to cover.
Inappropriate or less cost effective? I'm sorry, somewhere my volume has increased exponentially here.
It sure did.
My goodness.
I will get an answer to that question. But to my knowledge, they have never done that analysis. So, You know, the other thing to realize about DAS systems too is that they do not transmit power. So you have a volume of sites. And whether or not you can house multiple carriers through the same antenna is a question that I wrote down myself, because my understanding initially was that you could not. So you'll have a series of antennas for each carrier. So the second carrier comes along, you can use the same fiber ring, but you have to have separate antennas for that carrier, which means, of course, it's just a more visual clutter. So there's a balance, and there's a threshold of population density and above ground utilities and existence of fiber, and all cost is factored into the lead. It's not that SBA does not participate with DAS systems. Obviously we do, as well as Crown Castle, as well as American Tower, as we've heard earlier tonight. So it's just what's appropriate for the area of the town.
Fair enough.
But I will endeavor to get specific answers to those questions.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yep.
Kathy, I just had a couple things. Of the towers that we have in existence in Lake Forest, what is the tallest tower and what is the height of the shortest tower?
The current code permits the maximum tower height of 165 feet only at one location, and I believe that's on 41. I don't know that the existing towers out there are quite that high. I think most of our towers are at 100, 110 feet. We might have a few near the hospital that go up to 120 feet. But we can give you the specifics on all of that when we provide the map.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think the DAS system, does it work? What's the cost? Is it cost effective? I guess those have probably all been covered. That's all that I have for Commissioner Shaw. Said, you're good.
I have one more question.
Oh.
Okay, fine. Come on, go ahead.
I got one question, I guess, that was prompted by Mr. Cushman's request of Mr. Riley. Given the fact that the discussion is centering around taking out the Barra site, assume that that were to happen, then could our obligations under federal law be met with a DAS system? That's probably something you're going to have to talk to Dave Filippo about.
I will add that to the list. I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you. I didn't figure you'd have an answer right now.
Commissioner Newman?
I thought of a question here. We spend most of our time on the Sheridan Road site, but there's also a petition here for a Waukegan Road site. And I noted in the packet that the height of the Sheridan Road is 175, but I think the Waukegan is only 100 feet. Why the difference in height?
You'll have a presentation in a few minutes from that petitioner, and
Okay.
that question's probably appropriate.
I withdraw the question.
Thank you. Any final comments from commissioners? Okay. I guess I have one, and it's a comment. I really have two. Mr. Riley, I don't think 175 feet stands a chance. So start thinking of alternatives. That's one commissioner speaking. That is not the feeling or of the group here. It's just the feeling of the chairman presently. And that was just a comment. You don't need to stand up for that, and I don't expect any commentary. And lastly, I'd like to tell the citizens or whoever's listening in, there is no intent, I think, of this commission to prostitute Lake Forest character or environment with cell towers. And I think that we will do whatever we can to certainly prevent that. And I believe I speak for the whole commission when I say that. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Okay. This agenda item is finished.
It would be appropriate for someone to make a motion to continue this matter You did open the public hearing. That public hearing would be continued, brought back when we have answers, and when we have answers with sufficient time to make those available to the public to review those as well.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. All right, we will move on to the next agenda item before the commission. What's that?
Quick 10 minutes.
Quick 10 minutes? We're going to adjourn for a quick 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Maybe 5.
Maybe 5? We're going to adjourn for a quick 5 minutes.
So move.
What's that? 5 minutes. Yes.
Which means 10.
is consideration of a request for an amendment to Article 10, Personal Wireless Service Facilities of the City Code. The requested amendment would add a permitted tower location at 920 Waukegan Road in the parking lot of the private bank. Plan Commission will review preliminary information and public comments on this item. No action will be taken by the Commission on this item at this meeting. The members of the Commission have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest in this matter? Yeah? Okay. Kathy, let's use kind of the same agenda? Yeah, right? Okay, all right. So we will start with the presentation by the petitioner.
You might want to swear in anyone who intends to speak,
I have to, oh, okay.
unless they did it at the beginning. I don't know.
I can do that. Anybody who, well, I guess you're the only one for public comment. Okay, just, do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge? Fine. Thanks. I had you guys in from the last one. Yeah. It's a carryover. Yeah, right. Right. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for your time tonight, and also like to thank Kathy Cerniak for helping us through this process. I have, excuse me, my name is Wanchai Jantudongsi, and I'm with LCC Law. I am an attorney. In this capacity, I'm representing T-Mobile as a site acquisition agent. I also have with me tonight Mr. Mike Biniak, who will be helping me present this petition. A little bit of history, as Mr. Riley went through the timetable of the process here. We have also been working with the City of Lake Forest to find the most appropriate location for T-Mobile's needs in this area, and we have come to a conclusion with this particular petition before you tonight. T-Mobile is a United States subsidiary of Deutsche Telekom. It's the fourth largest carrier in the United States, approximately 34 million customers, and of course it offers wireless voice messaging data services. And like other carriers, T-Mobile has come to the realization and the challenge that data usage for these smart devices has been increasingly a demand on the existing network, and as such, T-Mobile is always looking to improve and provide robust coverage for its customers. When T-Mobile first contacted us as site acquisition agents with this particular area, they provided us a map, a search ring, if you will, where they were lacking the sufficient capacity and coverage to provide to their customers. We then took that map, went to the area, and drove the area looking for potential co-location opportunities, meaning existing buildings, existing towers, existing structures that we could possibly put T-Mobile's antennas on. We went to Waukegan Road and discovered that the area is predominantly business, retail, also government buildings as well. In particular, and as well as religious organizations. So we approach St. Patrick Catholic Church, which is on 991 Waukegan Road, and there is their church is a tall standing structure with a belfry that we could have possibly put antennas within the belfry structure, but they were not interested. They have stated that they have been approached multiple times by different carriers and consistently remain uninterested. We also explored the fire station I believe that's your fire station number 2, and I believe we were also met with disinterest at that location as well. And finally, we came down to a couple of interested landlords, privately owned, both at Forest Square as well as the private bank. We were able to come up with an agreeable lease agreement with the private bank, and as such, we do have a current lease/option with private bank for leasing space to do this installation. So that's just a little bit of background of how we came to this particular location. I'm going to hand it over to Mike, who will talk specifically about this location, as well as the type of structure that we're proposing, which is the similar structure, that unipole structure, where the antennas and cabling are hidden within the structure itself.
Thanks, Wanchai. Good evening, gentlemen, ladies. My name is Mike Bienick. I'm with LCC Law, and my background is in the planning and zoning. I have my degree in planning. I've worked in multiple municipalities, and I've also been in the wireless industry now for up to 11 years. So what I want to do is, real briefly, I'm going to go through this PowerPoint presentation that we've put together. This basically goes over what we are proposing. As was stated before, we are proposing to amend the City of Lake Forest City Code, Article 10, to allow for a flagpole. That's what these are typically called. It's at 920 South Waukegan Road. T-Mobile is proposing to erect a 100-foot tall flagpole tower on the subject property. The key components that we look for a good site is the effect on the overall grid system, the potential for co-location for additional users, the appropriate location for necessary for the site to provide needed coverage for the area. The goals of this site is to provide better coverage for T-Mobile along a major thoroughfare in Lake Forest, provide better coverage for businesses and residents in and around the area, enhance the public safety through better cell coverage and through enhanced E911 coverage, to also provide co-location opportunities, as I mentioned before, for other wireless carriers in this area, and finally, enhanced data usage for iPhone and Wi-Fi type users. According to the 2010 census, 293 million people subscribed for a wireless device out of a total population in the United States of 308 million. That is approximately 28.75 million households, which is approximately 25 to 26% do not actually use a landline anymore. 300,000 E911 calls are placed every day throughout the country. 87% of all small to medium businesses rely on cell phone technology for business communications. The site location that we are proposing, as you can see, is the southeast corner of the private bank located at 920 South Waukegan Road. We propose to put the tower, as you can see by the arrow there, in the southeast, the back corner of the property. We have done some photo simulations for this, showing what this proposed flagpole will look like. That is what the flagpole will look like. And as was mentioned earlier, and you saw a picture, this will be similar, slightly smaller than the one at the village of Deerfield, but you will not, one of the nice things is you will not have that cluster of antennas that you see in the middle. Those are for their emergency services. That's why those antennas are there. Otherwise, all antennas will be concealed within that canister, so you will not see any antennas. Attached here are the propagation maps. If you look at it, we have 3 levels of service that we are looking at. You have the gray, which represents the on-street coverage. That means, basically what that means is if you are out on the street, you would expect to have some coverage. If you're in a building or a car, what would likely happen is that's when you have dropped calls or very staticky calls, you probably would have no quality data coverage in those areas. The little white pixels, those are areas where there is no coverage. So then you get into the yellow, which represents the in-vehicle coverage. If you were in a car, you could expect good coverage. On a sidewalk, outside, you could expect good coverage. In building, you could expect some coverage, probably not in a basement, more in a house on a first floor or upper floor. You could probably expect decent coverage. And then the green represents the in-building coverage, which is more of a building such as this. It's a little bit more dense than a regular house. So if you look at the coverage here along Waukegan, go to the next slide, you can see the coverage fill in. It is mostly the in-building and in-vehicle coverage along Route 43. Toggle it a little bit so you can kind of see the comparison that we are filling in, that there is a total gap there centered just north of Everett along Waukegan Road. So by having this site at 100 feet, that is the coverage we would expect to have based on T-Mobile's radio frequency engineers. They do technological studies that mimic what the coverage would look like in that area based on existing and proposed coverages. If you look, this is now the site layout. As I mentioned, we are locating in that rear corner right in here. The bank building is over here, and this is Waukegan here. The flagpole will allow for coverage without the negative visual impact of a typical monopole or self-support tower where you see the antennas sticking out and all that. So that's the proposal for going with the flagpole. Waukegan roads, high traffic volume will benefit from the increased coverage, as will obviously the businesses and residents in that area. I included this the next two slides. This is an existing flagpole type tower. It's a little bit different than the Deerfield Tower in that Deerfield does not have a flag on their tower. So I included this. This is a tower I did for another carrier several years ago in the village of Niles. It is located on Milwaukee Avenue, just south of Oakton. It is at the Oasis Water Park, if anyone wants to go see it. This is built for multiple carriers. At the time I did the zoning work on this, it was 2 carriers were going in at the same time. I don't know at this point whether third, fourth, or fifth carrier. It was built for 5 carriers, and it was built at 120 feet. And if you look, wrong way, I'm sorry. Here you look at the base of the tower, you can see that building. That is where the Park District has the Oasis Water Park is back to the background, right back in here. And what they did was they built onto this building the equipment shelter. So basically you have, in this case, you have the flagpole with no visible equipment outside. What we are proposing at the bank building is to build an 8-foot concrete or brick wall that will surround the compound, so it will mimic what is there with the existing building. So it will, obviously it won't hide the tower itself, but it will hide the equipment at the ground. So basically that is what we are proposing. If you have any questions, we are here to answer. We also have the radio frequency engineer here with T-Mobile, Sanjay, and we can answer any questions you have. And we also have the report, as Mr. Riley stated, we received ours as well this past Friday, so we are working to get those answers to you for a following hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, identification of issues by staff. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, just one last comment, which was, I know that in the public comment there was a question about providing the evidence and data. We do have our, as Mike mentioned, a radio frequency engineer here who actually put together those propagation maps who can attest to the coverage needs there. So he'd be more than happy to address that. A quick comment also about the DAS systems. DAS has been around, and Sanjay can correct me if I'm wrong, for maybe 8-9 years now. It's not necessarily the next thing or the newest thing. It's, as I think Mr. Riley mentioned, is a component of a wireless system where there are coverage issues, where there's a lack of other solution, then DAS does come into play. But for this particular proposal in this particular location, given the business nature of the area, we find that it would be most appropriate to put a cell tower and have that available also for co-location for other carriers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy, issues?
Much of the background I provided during the last petition applies here. I won't repeat that. I think in this case, one of the things we want to work with the consultant on is to really look at, after we answer the first question, is there a demonstrated need? Can that be appropriately documented? To really look at, again, alternative technologies, but if a tower is appropriate, is determined to be needed, then to really look at what is the appropriate site to serve this West Lake Forest area. As I mentioned, we have had some conversations with the school district. There may be some opportunities to locate a tower in an area that would be less centrally located in a business district. So we intend to get the answers to those questions before this matter returns to you for action.
Okay, thank you. Public commentary? Do the name and address thing again. Just
Okay, my name's Holly Williams. I'm still
Okay.
at 428 Beverly.
Good, thanks.
Commissioners, Kathy. Don't want to be redundant. We covered an awful lot of essential information on the first petition, but the subject of camouflage or appearance came up. And after a whole bunch of ifs, if there's need, if no other technology works, if co-location will work, all that, and we have to resign ourselves to some vertical structure, a unipole or something. There are communities that mandate camouflage, and that doesn't mean just putting a flag on the end of a pole. They require bell towers. They require clock towers. Westlake Forest, if I say McDonald's, we all know what we went through years ago fighting the visual blight of what we thought McDonald's was going to bring. Every building, Lovell's, the shopping centers, they are designed with such care. Anything that goes into that district deserves that same attention, I'm sure. And as you so rightly said, we do not want to prostitute the character of the community, but if we ultimately, at the end of the day, after everything's exhausted, have to do some kind of vertical structure, make it camouflage, make it look like the buildings. If it were a bell tower or a clock tower, it's going to be a lot less obtrusive than a flagpole, because that just still sticks out. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Richard Steck, Villa Turicum. The gentleman in the red shirt, I'm sorry, I didn't get you.
Mike Beating.
Mike, your coverage maps were done with great precision, I think, and they need to be appreciated. But let me go to your flagpole. First of all,
Mr. Steck, pardon me. I just wish you'd raise a public commentary and pretty much address it to us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or address it to Kathy. Sure. And ask the questions. Okay. I don't think we want to. I don't think we want to back and forth.
All right. First time here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
The question I had is, I said that the coverage maps were very precisely done and are believable. The flagpole. I would like to know the dimensions of the flagpole at the base, the diameter, and at the top. And I think you said it's 100 feet high. And if it's one of these 3-foot base flagpoles, that would be a novelty for Lake Forest. I don't think we have anything like that right now. It would be an oddity here. A flag, if someone says flagpole, it means that kind of a flagpole. So I'd like that clarified, and I'd like any presentation of that flagpole to be done with some reference points. In other words, a ruler in front of it or something, so you could tell exactly what it is and what we're getting into. I think T-Mobile deserves coverage. I think it's a great company. That's it.
Okay, thank you. No additional comments? Okay. We will go to the commissioners. We'll start with Mr. Cushman.
Well, just curious about the comments relating to your discussions with the fire department. Do we have any background on why the reluctance to entertain a?
My recollection is those discussions occurred a while ago. Some of the proposal or the concept may have required an increase in height of the tower of the fire station. So altering the exterior appearance, I think, was a concern. There was also an issue that tower is actually used to dry hoses. So it's a functional part of the fire department. There was also discussion about the location of ground equipment, where that would go. So there were some space issues, there were some use issues, certainly something that we can revisit and bring you back some further information.
Insurmountable or seemingly insurmountable, or?
We can certainly revisit it, and I'll put that down as a question and something to bring you back more information on.
Commissioner Karras?
I've got a few questions. One related to the coverage area. This is probably for Mr. Vinick, and I guess for our consultant as well, is the interrelationship between the coverage areas between the two towers and how they're affected. I believe the petition calls for, in this situation, 6 users as well, in addition as the other one. So I'd like that clarified, if at all possible. You referred to the flagpole being called a flagpole, and then in the pictures displayed a flag, appealing to our patriotic nature, obviously. But I didn't notice on the plans that there was accommodation for lighting of the flag in the evening time, which could affect area residents and aesthetics, etc., and how that the flag would be maintained and accommodated.
Would the, excuse me, Commissioner, would the petitioner like to respond to those? In this case, it's okay for the commissioners to address either staff or the petitioner.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
What I wrote down was you wanted to know the interrelation of the towers. Let's see if I can back it up to show you the propagation maps. That would help, I believe.
Right.
Okay. Here we go. Basically, the way the technology works is each cell works in and of itself. You can see how they have their coverage areas. However, they are not in and of themselves. They are a network. As you can see, it's almost a grid pattern. If we were working on a completely new system, we had no streets, it was just a complete, flat area, we would have a grid that, based on a separate separation distance. But in this case, we do have, points where we have to go or can go. And so what happens is, as you're driving along, the example being, if you're driving along Waukegan and you come up here, from down here, from the south, you pick up the nearest tower. It's a seamless transition that you don't even see, but you get the coverage based on that tower. As you're driving along, you get to a kind of a midpoint, and it's also based on the amount of capacity that's on a site as to how you transition to that next site. The site that we're proposing, for example, just could have a lot of users. So it would take you a little longer to transition from that tower to the south, and your cell phone would automatically pick up that next site. So as you're going along in those areas, you transition from cell tower to cell tower. That's the interrelation between the sites.
Okay, so the coverage in this instance would not have any effect on the coverage of the other tower that was
No.
earlier proposed?
What
Okay.
happens in wireless, if you get too close to one site, then you interfere with that signal. If you get too far, you end up with gaps and drops and all that kind of stuff. So you try and space them, as you can see, somewhat relatively equidistant. But as you get into more dense urban areas, like Mr. Riley stated in his presentation, the towers come lower and you have more density because you're carrying not just coverage, but you're also trying to solve capacity issues. So you have, in the city of Chicago, you'd have umpteen billion times more cell towers and.
Right.
All right, so lighting of the flag. What they do on these, as you know, since there's a flag up on the tower at all times, they would put a light guided straight up at the tower from the base of the tower. So it would not have any spillover to the neighbors. It would be directed directly on the flag itself.
Okay. So the accommodation's been made?
Yes. In some cases, if you can place it at different levels down on the ground or different angles so that it's directed straight onto the flag. Finally, the maintenance of the flag. I don't know the specifics of this lease, but typically what happens is there is a provision that the carrier will provide the landlord with X number of flags to be replaced and or money depending on how the lease is written.
Okay.
So it would be replaced in the lease agreement.
I can speak specifically to the lease that, those accommodations have been made. However, there is the option, I'm sorry, I should go here. There is the option of not putting up a flag because of the requirements, the federal requirements to lower, raise it, and also the lighting becomes a concern. So it's an option that we can explore, whether to have a flag on the pole or to keep it the sleek unit pole.
Okay, and then my final question was about the 6 user capacity. Is that true here as well, or is this only T-Mobile?
No, this is not 6 carrier. It would have multi-carrier, but obviously based on the height, you can't cover that many carriers, as Mr. Riley stated. When you start getting down to the 100, 119, you have issues with interference from foliage, other buildings. So with the 100-foot monopole or flagpole, you can't have 6 users because with the 10-foot separation, you're down.
But it is a multiple unit.
Yes.
User pole.
Yes, okay. You'd probably get 2, maybe if you really were lucky, depending on the tree heights, maybe 3.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Shaw?
My questions have been answered.
Okay. Commissioner Culbertson?
On that last point, so this is basically a single user tower? Single provider tower?
No, it would probably be, you would be able to accommodate 2, possibly 3 users. You'd have to you get into the ultimate conundrum in that we would need to go higher in order to get more users. So it's kind of a balancing game.
So does that answer Commissioner Newman's earlier point about why the difference between 175 and 100 feet?
It does in the sense that, as Mr. Riley was stating, there are no towers in the area that they were looking for theirs, whereas, as you can see here, there is a lot of towers here that are somewhat around but don't provide that coverage gap, as you saw when I toggled the propagation map. It's more specific to covering that area, those businesses, those residents, as well as obviously the traffic along Waukegan Road. Whereas with the greater height, you are covering a bigger area. Whereas this, T-Mobile is able to go a little bit lower and cover a much more specified need in Waukegan Road.
Yeah, this height is sufficient for T-Mobile's coverage, so we don't need to go any higher than 100 feet for this particular area.
Kathy, I think just for, a topic for the consultant perhaps to cover is, how many towers do we want to build that will, do we want to cover one carrier, 3 carriers, 6 carriers per tower? How much? This can get out of hand. Just a curious question. The lower right-hand corner of that map right there, there's no green around that tower. Is that an existing tower, or is that a proposed tower, or is?
Sanjay, do you know? I'm not sure where that, I know which point you're talking about, right in the lower right corner.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's because I've left it out from the prediction. It doesn't have any impact on the coverage or lack of coverage in the area that we're concerned about. So
Sure does on the last petition.
Where is that tower?
Where is that,
The
exactly?
downtown Highland Park?
Well, here's 22, this is 22, so.
That is downtown.
But
Yeah.
it would be green, right, Sanjay?
I just haven't
Yeah.
included it in the study.
Understood.
Understood.
It was an oversight, okay.
No, I understood. Sorry for the digression. And one last question. How big a flag would you propose?
On a 100-foot tower, we're probably talking, I would say, I don't know, probably 20 by 30 at most.
You might want to provide that information.
Yes, I will find out.
And I take issue with the uplighting not affecting the surrounding neighborhoods.
Well, what I was saying is we can direct the light.
I know,
didn't
but
say it won't.
you're still illuminating a big object in the sky that
Understood.
is seen for miles around, so, or for great distances anyway, so.
Well, that is, as Wenchai mentioned, that is an option. If we do not
Right.
put a flag on, it will not need to be lit. So that's certainly something for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Newman?
There seems to be a question out here.
Oh,
Thank you. It was just a comment. I would direct your attention to the east end of Leslie Avenue.
Microphone.
I'm sorry.
We have people at home who are listening.
Again, Richard Riley on behalf of SBA. This is a self-serving comment, but I wanted to direct your attention to the coverage map at the east end of Wesley Road. You can see the vast amount of gray area there, which indicates, of course,
Mr. Riley, we're dealing with the other issue
I
right now,
understand.
okay?
Thank you.
But thank you.
Sure.
I guess I'm troubled by this petition in the sense that this is a one-off, possibly two-off, and I know other people have complained about lack of coverage. I guess I would have to see a coverage map of all the carriers in that area, lest we be approached by other carriers to put up a single tower to fill their gap needs. I'd kind of like to know what's going on here. A single tower kind of bothers me a little bit.
Commissioner Culbertson has already talked about that a little bit. I think
Right.
our consultant clearly needs to bring us up to speed on everyone's coverage, existing coverage, and the likelihood that others will emerge in the future.
Right. And, what does T-Mobile want to do about the east side coverage gap there?
Right.
If the 175-foot tower is unsuccessful, or if some of these other technologies, alternative technologies prove to be less than viable.
Okay. You finished? Commissioner, you finished? Okay. I have several questions. It's starting off, and I think these gentlemen have kind of touched on it, but I think I'd like to be a little more specific. I live over near there, as does Commissioner Shaw. Anecdotally, there is no coverage problem over there. I've never had a lost call. I don't know of anybody who has had a lost call. going back to our previous one, I didn't say it, but anecdotally, I've always felt that there were some coverage gaps in the southeastern part of Lake Forest. But here, I don't know of any. You know, why? Help me in this.
Well, first off, let me ask who you have for coverage. Who's your provider?
Well, I have Verizon, and my wife has an iPhone, so she'd probably have AT&T.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked, it's not to pry, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to
No,
be nosy.
that's a legitimate question.
Basically, each carrier has their own grid system. Unfortunately, had this all come and the federal government decided that we were a utility and wanted every carrier to be on every pole, every site that they're at, you would all have exactly the same coverage. But I can't speak for Verizon, I can't speak for AT&T to tell you exactly where their locations are, where they fall in the grid, but you might find that AT&T has a site not too far to the south, not too far to the north, east, or west, therefore you're getting your coverage. What this propagation map shows is this is the existing coverage for a T-Mobile customer right in that area.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's where, you know, that's why I asked you
so
what.
you could have T-Mobile could have a one-off issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, fine. That's the answer to the question. You're being purchased by AT&T.
It has gone through the
Yes.
Discussions.
Right.
It is now with the federal government.
But it's with the Justice Department.
Right.
Right. I'm surprised you're in front of us. Why would you waste the money of going into a deal with whoever owns the private bank building, when in fact, if the Justice Department approves it, this could be a moot point in 6 to 8 months?
True, but again, this T-Mobile at this point in time, the deal is not final. They need to still build their network.
And you would do that, even in the, you would enter into a contract, even though there may be some extensive synergies available to you within 6 to 8 months.
True, but several, or maybe 4 or 5 years ago, AT&T was purchased by Singular. They went under the name of Singular for a year or so and decided for branding purposes that AT&T was more the recognizable name, so they switched over. In that merger purchase, there were some redundancies. However, what ended up happening due to capacity, you found that a lot of the Singular and AT&T sites were both needed. It wasn't you know, hey, we need you, we don't need you type thing so much. That was more in the rural areas where you had these 300-foot tall towers out in central Illinois. Then you had some of the redundancy issues. In the urban areas, you don't have that so much because of the capacity, especially like on Waukegan Road. You have a lot of traffic, you have businesses. So there is that capacity that is needed. So based on that, that's why companies like T-Mobile that are in this process would still be interested in going forward.
Yeah. You've signed the lease?
Yes.
You've signed the lease?
It's an option, of course.
What does that mean?
Based on the fact that if we don't get the approvals, the landlord,
yeah,
we wouldn't hold
yeah,
to it.
Of course, of course, of course. Let me see if I have any other questions for you. Yes, one. What are the height alternatives? Everybody that comes before us asks for the moon and wants to settle for the, you know, whatever, you know, 175 down to 100. But you're 100 going to what?
Well, it depends on what the consultant wants and what the board wants. I mean, we could go taller, obviously, would accommodate more users, but I don't see it going down.
It's the wrong direction.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, right.
But the point was made, could you make it usable for more carriers? That would mean up. But what happens is if you go down from the 100 feet, you have mature trees in this community. It's not a farm community where you have wide open spaces. The propagation of the signal does not penetrate in the spring and summer months through these mature trees. So you have to get above the tree levels. And that's why you have to have that 100-foot level, because most of these trees are 60, 70 feet. And then if you're talking a second carrier or potentially third carrier, you're right at the treetop. So it becomes a really difficult challenge to bring it down any.
Okay. I've got just a couple more things, and then I know Commissioner Shaw has one, and then we'll double back to you. Kathy, I can't conceive of putting a cell tower here in the middle of what I'll call a pristine area. Are there no better alternative sites? I mean, let's suppose the need has been established, and let's suppose we absolutely have to move forward. Is there nothing that could be done on West Campus?
I think those are the kinds of questions we need to talk to the consultant about. All those questions have been raised.
Yeah.
So we need to do that research once we get some further data.
Right. Now, Petitioner, that's not an absolute. I mean,
Understood.
But it just seems to me there are a whole lot better locations that are screened and shielded, that presently have poles and whatever. I think West Campus is one of them. That as much as I don't want to put up another, I personally don't want to put up any more cell towers. I know at some point we may have to, because we've got an obligation to the citizens to provide good coverage, for goodness sakes. And I agree, it is a safety issue in many cases. So, but I'm not fascinated with this location.
Okay, I've made note to look at other alternatives.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I have. Will Commissioner Shaw?
Yeah.
Then we'll segue to Commissioner Newman, and if any of you other commissioners have a.
You almost asked my question, and that was, when you say you'll look at other options, are you suggesting that if the West Campus became a possibility, that T-Mobile is, I don't know how far north your dead zone's going, are you saying that's a possibility?
I'm not ruling out it as a possibility. Obviously, the carriers don't prefer to just go moving around. It becomes kind of a tricky issue when you start asking us to look at alternative locations. I'm not saying by any stretch I wouldn't, but when I've run into this in the past where a plan commission in another community asked us 4 times to look at other locations. We looked at those locations, and every time we came back, it was, well, we don't like this location. So it becomes really difficult to just start looking at alternative locations without some feedback as to where we should look, why we should look there, that type of thing, so that we're not running around, 3 years later doing all this work and not getting anywhere. With the residents and that, it could become, well, you moved here, but now you're imposing on more residents versus being in the business area. That's the kind of stuff that, I'd like to find out.
What's that cross street there that's got a name on it? I can't see it far away. I'm getting
It's
old.
Everett.
It is Everett?
Yes.
What's the one north of it then?
Wesley.
Wesley.
That's where the West Campus
This is Wesley, and this is 60.
All right. Where Wesley is, that is where, that northern end of your dead zone is where the West Campus is, over near off of Waukegan Road. I don't know if that's something that would still serve your purpose or not.
Well, I think what you're gonna find, if you look at these green areas, is they're pretty circular in nature. I mean, based on the fact of topography, interference issues such as trees, they're not true circles. If you moved all the way up to Wesley, you're going to have that bottom of that yellow would probably hit about wherever it is. And so you would now have this area down south of Everett, right in here.
Would still be a dead zone?
Would still be dead, right.
Okay, so by putting it where you've got in mind, that hits all that gray area.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you look at what it covers, you still have a couple quote-unquote dead spots, but it certainly fills it in a little bit better.
My last question, and you may not be able to answer this, but we've kicked around this discussion of DAS, both with Riley's and somewhat with yours. given the fact that you've got coverage this close together, why is DAS not an option here?
Well, DAS, you know, I think it's something that we obviously need to explore based on your concerns. But DAS tends to be more of a quote-unquote in-building type of a coverage system. It's used at Soldier Field. It's used in the United Center. It's used in all kinds of areas downtown, McCormick Place. They ran into this when Schaumburg built the convention center. There was a big article in the Daily Herald showing people standing on the balcony because when they built it, they had cell coverage, but the building was so substantial, it was, you know, concrete and all that the people at these conventions couldn't get the coverage. So what the DAS system does, it's distributed toward that building more than it is for a coverage of a greater area. Now, I know we had talked briefly about Barrington Hills. I was involved in some of that discussion with the village, and part of the problems that they had is it's the square mileage, I believe, is like 64 square miles of territory, and I want to say it was like 75% forest preserve. And the forest preserve did not want anything on their land. So you had to come up with some alternatives to covering that area, and that's where some of that DAS was able to be utilized in that. It wasn't a either or, it does supplement other towers that are there.
So then why is it that a DAS, given that you got those 3 green areas, why wouldn't a DAS fit in just fine there?
It would struggle to cover the amount of traffic you have there and the businesses. You would not get the penetration into the buildings as you would with the tower.
Your United Center argument?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Can I hitchhike on that point before?
Sure.
Okay. Continuing with that subject, you were worried about us running you around in terms of alternate sites. You must remember that I addressed that question to Kathy, not to you.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, I go back to what I said before, and this is kind of a heads up. I can't conceive of myself voting for a cell tower on the private bank property. Okay? I have that property in my mind second only to downtown Lake Forest. It is inconceivable, and it will be viewed by so many eyes every day. I just can't conceive of it being there. It will be so conspicuous that I just can't conceive it. So while I'm asking Kathy to come up with alternate sites, I ask for you to work with Kathy to not only come out to alternate sites, but accommodate what your plans are so that, once again, going back to the statement that we made before, let's not prostitute the character and the environment of Lake Forest for a cell tower.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay.
That's my plea.
Yes, sir.
That is my plea to you. Okay.
We will work with Kathy directly.
Commissioner Newman?
Just adding on to some earlier thoughts, have you explored any building rooftops as possibilities? There's a couple 3 or 4 story structures over on Waukegan Road over there. And or have you, did you pursue other ways of disguising the tower?
No.
We did explore the rooftops. So one I mentioned specifically was St. Patrick's Cathedral there, and they were not interested. In fact, at the private bank, we did explore putting antennas on the structure of the bank itself. We ran through with the engineering tests and also the design. It would have been a very complicated design because of the hollow structure of the tower part of private bank. If you are looking at the bank, let's say you're going through the drive-through, there is this the tower there. We thought about disguising the antennas and then placing them in a brick-like facade so that they could stick on the side of that tower, and it would have been it would have been an issue with the coaxial cable that needs to connect with the antennas because of that hollow structure. So that being stated, we also noted that it would have been significant height loss in terms of putting antennas on top of a 3 or 4 story building. The tower would, in effect, give us the capacity, the coverage that we needed, and then also, as previously mentioned, is a co-location opportunity so that there does not need to be another tower if another carrier comes by and says, well, we also need coverage here as well. That's one thing about these towers, is that we as site acquisition agents are specifically going out into the field and looking for existing structures, because we know that that is the fastest point from searching to approval in terms of its existing structure. If we can fit it, we can make it happen. When we're proposing a new tower, we know that we're going to have a lot more research needed, a lot more questions that we need to answer. So if we are approved for this particular tower, I'm pretty certain that other carriers would probably come out of the woodwork and say, hey, there's a tower coming up there. We'd probably be interested in co-locating on that tower too.
Thank you. Any final comments from commissioners? Kathy, I have one that's a little belated. Going back to the ComEd site, could somebody tell us what the elevation of that site is? Thinking that it would, I mean, that it might affect the potential height of the tower. Okay. Kathy, do you have any further questions or comments or anything?
No, again, I think we'll come back to you with a question and answer format, try and hit everything clearly. Maybe some disagreement on the answers to certain questions, and we'll do what we can to sort those out.
Okay, and what motion do we need now, Kathy?
An appropriate motion, if you choose to do so, would be to continue this matter. And direct staff to...
Mr. Shaw just made that motion.
I just made that motion.
Yes.
You didn't hear me.
Right. It's all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for stopping by. I know. Kathy. Oh, here we go. Any public testimony on non-agenda items?
Has that ever happened?
No, thank God. And any additional information from staff?
I would just ask if anybody did not receive a direct mailed notice and would like to, please either email me your name and address or leave it here with me tonight. We do have a growing mailing list on this issue, and we will continue to keep you informed.
I will entertain a motion for, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Let's go home. Thank you.
You did.